guys, I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula.
We're the hosts of the true crime podcast, Strictly Stalking, brought to you from Podcast One.
Each week, Strictly Stalking gives stalking survivors the platform to share their stories in their own words.
Do you know why survivors refer to stalking as murder in slow motion? Have you ever felt like you were being hunted by a stranger? Would you know where to turn if a stalker was living in your house and you didn't know?
We're bringing you these stories to raise awareness about stalking and give you the resources to know what to do if you or someone you know is being stalked.
So tune in to Strictly Stalking each week as we dive into the largely unknown crime of stalking.
Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite true crime podcast.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige.
Stefanie's was a true humanitarian. Well, she's very outgoing and very confident. The hardest is not being there when she died and not saying goodbye. How much it must have hurt. Physically, how much it must have hurt her.
Stefanie Rengel lived in a 2-story home in Toronto, Canada in Parkview Hills with her mother Patricia, her stepfather James Hung, and 3 brothers, 12-year-old Ian, 4-year-old Eric, and the baby of the bunch, 2-year-old Patrick. This family was a tight-knit group who were loving and supportive of each other. Patricia was said to be a stern mother, but very reasonable. Patricia spent her childhood growing up in the area they were all currently living. Adolfo Rengel was Patricia's first husband, who was a Toronto Police Service court officer and a Venezuelan migrant. The two divorced when Stefanie was only 6 years old. Stefanie and her brother Ian mainly stayed with their mother. Stefanie's 2 maternal aunts resided in Parkview Hills as well. It was a lot of fun for Stefanie and Ian to hop on their bikes or their skateboards to hang out with their cousins. Patricia's house was the popular hangout spot for her children's friends. Stefanie's girlfriends would often flock to the living room where they would have fun slumber parties. Patricia started dating James in 2000. He was a man of few words, very concise and to the point, as well as sociable and well-liked. They fell head over heels for each other. Patricia was a police officer whose expertise was in gang exiting and cyberbullying, while James was a police sergeant with the Emergency Task Force. They decided to make their home in Parkview Hills. Stefanie was 14 years old in 2008, and what us older millennials referred to back in the early 2000s as an emo, punk, or scene kid. I was definitely a part of that group in high school during the early aughts, and my teenage self can definitely relate to Stefanie. She loved expressing herself through her looks. She would dye her hair all different colors often. At school, she might have grabbed your attention by wearing a tutu with sneakers, or in a pair of boxers with hearts on them over leggings. And she loved finding these clothes in secondhand stores in the Kensington Market. Stefanie loved wearing bright-colored bracelets made out of beads, and we cannot forget the classic must-have eyeliner. Stefanie was self-expressive and proud. She was also a natural at performing. In 2008, the artsy, vibrant 14-year-old had just embarked on her venture of attending Rosedale Heights School of the Arts for a drama program, and she had just started going to a Baptist church, joining their youth crew. Stefanie's choice of music to jam out to at the time was Christian rock and Latin music. She was a talented girl who made time to write poetry, and she would take her digital camera everywhere, taking hundreds of pictures. Not only was she gifted, but she really cared about others and the environment. Stefanie made sure to collect any elastic bands off the ground when she saw them, because she did not want any birds or other animals to come along and get choked on them. As mentioned, Patricia was a firm, somewhat strict mother, but she wasn't extremely unreasonable. She allowed Stefanie to see boyfriends as long as it was at her house. She was also given the okay to get her nose pierced, but she had to take it out for church, where she taught children in the Sunday school class. And she was able to have a Facebook account, as long as Patricia knew the password. Her mother would spontaneously check her Facebook to make sure her teenage daughter was being safe, that no strange people were contacting her, and she had also installed a keystroke monitoring system on their family's computer. Adolfo had gotten remarried to a woman named Maureen, and they lived in Whitby. When Stefanie visited her father and stepmother, they ran an even tighter ship. Adolfo heavily monitored Stefanie's computer time, and she could not use the webcam. She and her brother Ian always had to be home before it began to get dark outside, and, sweetly, Adolfo had the nickname Rihanna for his daughter, which means queen. He would have talks with Stefanie frequently about staying aware of everyone around her, to be careful in her choices, including who she trusted and places she would go. As cheeky and bold as Stefanie could be, on the inside, she was very trusting and soft-hearted. On New Year's Eve 2007, her parents rented a karaoke machine, and Stefanie chose to sing the popular, sad song by Avril Lavigne called Slipped Away. Some of those lyrics go, I miss you so bad. I don't forget you, oh it's so sad. I hope you can hear me, I remember it clearly. The day you slipped away was the day I found it won't be the same. I didn't turn around to kiss you goodbye on the hand. I wish that I could see you again. I know that I can't. I hope you can hear me, 'cause I remember it clearly. The day you slipped away was the day I found it won't be the same. It wasn't long before midnight when she, her family, and friends gathered together, counting down the seconds to 2008. On the first day of the new year, the snow was falling and the temperature was frigid. However, that would not stop Stefanie from going to a friend's house close by early in the afternoon. She was back home in time for dinner. Her mom and stepfather were not at home. It was just her and Ian. They were hanging out in the kitchen eating chips and grilled cheese sandwiches when, at 6:08 p.m., someone was calling her cell phone from a blocked number. She answered, and she thought it was Steve Lopez, her ex-boyfriend. They had broken up 2 months prior. All of a sudden, Stefanie seemed upset and panicked, asking, "Is that you?" And moments later, she said, "Meet me, meet me," right before she frantically put on her boots, telling Ian that she would be right back. She rushed out of the house so fast that she forgot a coat. The person who had called her was not her ex-boyfriend as she had thought. Let's go through how we got to this point. Around 2006, Stefanie was 12 years old and dating a 15-year-old named David Bagshaw. She was elated, and getting attention from a high school football player made her feel really good. They would go to pizza places for little dates or spend time at the park by Stefanie's house. This young couple only lasted a few weeks. David called Stefanie and left a sexual message that Patricia heard. David desired their relationship to be more than it was. He wanted their connection to be a little more intense and expressed that he would like them to start having oral sex as well. Patricia was not having that. She told Stefanie to not go near that boy again. Of course, Stefanie was upset because she felt her mother didn't trust her to turn down David's sexual advances and say no. After a little time passed, Stefanie began to move past it and go on with her life. David Bagshaw was born to Ronald and Cindy, who were separated. As a toddler, David was diagnosed with ADHD. All throughout his school years, he had social issues due to his behavior. He would have tantrums that were hostile. When he was in junior high, he rarely went to classes, and when he did show up, he would get into fights and swear at people, which resulted in suspensions from school. There was a violent incident when he was 14 that involved him attacking his mother. He was charged for the assault, but after he said he would go to anger management classes, the charges were dropped. After that, David would bounce back and forth from his father's house and his mother's. Then, for 3 months when David was 15, he lived in a group home. David was attending East York Collegiate, where he met and began dating a girl named Melissa Todorovic in March of 2007. Melissa resided with her parents, Zoran and Rachel, and her little brother Nicholas in Scarborough. Her father, Zoran, was a Serbian migrant who was a mechanic, and her mother, Rachel, was a nurse. Melissa had a great relationship with her father. He would take her out to hockey games, and they would go on fishing excursions among many other father-daughter adventures and good times. Melissa and her mother, Rachel, had a great relationship as well. As a family, they would take trips to Mexico, the Caribbean, and in the summers, they would stay at their family cottage. Melissa was a brilliant, hard-working 8th grade student who made straight A's. Her teachers said she was considerate, helpful, and independent. Melissa was the complete opposite of Stefanie. Stefanie seemed to know who she was confident in her own skin, and expressed herself through her clothes, hairstyles, and performance art. Melissa, on the other hand, was not a very confident person. She had anxiety about how she looked, she wore glasses, braces, and she was uncomfortable with her weight. She didn't like anything about the way she looked, and she would pick herself apart. Melissa thought her breasts were too small, her toes were too long, her hands were too chubby, and she wanted to eventually get a rhinoplasty because she thought her nose was too bumpy. Before school each morning, Melissa would straighten her naturally wavy hair for a long time. If it was a rainy morning, doing her hair at home would all be for nothing, so she would carry her straightening iron to school and do it there instead. Often, Melissa would battle with bulimia as well. She thought all of the issues she had with herself would go away or get better if she had a boyfriend to comfort and support her. Now that she had David for a boyfriend, Melissa figured she would feel better. David was her 4th boyfriend, and instead of a relationship making her feel better, she became more self-destructive with each one, and she would sabotage these relationships. For example, she would secretly go through emails of the person she was with. When they would realize that she did not trust them and was spying on them in different ways, they would break up with her. Anytime Melissa would go through a breakup, she would self-harm. Before she and David began seeing each other, she threatened and intimidated her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. She would also talk badly about her ex, attempting to embarrass and degrade him. Melissa called the new girlfriend a slut and would say her ex-boyfriend was horrible at sex. Melissa made terrible remarks about his pubic hair, said he smelled awful, and she would talk down about how he looked and the clothes he wore. Not only is all of that bad enough, but she even threw David in the middle of it when they got together, telling her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend that she was going to get David to beat both of them up. During Melissa and David's relationship, he was cheating on her and physically abusing her. Melissa was very controlling, to the point that David's father, Ronald, would not let her come inside of their home. This happened after Melissa left a note for David's mother, Cindy, shaming her as a mother. Melissa was also extremely jealous and possessive. As she had done in the past, she put spyware on David's computer and spied on his emails and saw what he was doing online. Ronald found out about this, and to say he didn't like it is an understatement. He was quite alarmed by all of her behavior. Stefanie Rengel and Melissa Todorovic did not know each other at all. Melissa only knew that she and David had been together in the past. David had remarked that Stefanie was a pretty girl, and that set Melissa into a spiral. She began stalking Stefanie's Facebook pictures and carefully went over each one. Stefanie told one of Melissa's cousins that David was not a good guy and that he had been flirting not only with her, but several other girls. All of this got back to Melissa, and she saw red. She was pissed, but not at the person she should have been mad at, which was David. No, she was angry with Stefanie. When Melissa's parents begged her to break up with David, since he was obviously not treating her right, Melissa said, "Who's going to look at somebody with braces and glasses when there's so many other pretty girls in high school?" Melissa began to stew in her frustration and anger geared towards Stefanie. She thought the best way to solve David's cheating and flirting would be to eliminate Stefanie from the situation for good. Melissa was extremely angry to find out David allegedly had been communicating with Stefanie. David and Melissa would communicate on MSN Instant Messenger. While they were having a conversation over Messenger online, David said, "Steph just said, don't hang up, this is very important, and after like 10 seconds she told me she was pregnant." There was never any evidence pointing to Stefanie being pregnant, or this conversation between the two ever taking place. Melissa responded to David, "You talked about something sexual? You know I'm gonna punch her if I see her. I'm gonna stab her baby." That made David pretty upset, replying that he would break up with her if she were to ever hurt a baby. Melissa wrote back, "Then I'll just kill her, which will kill the baby." Melissa had never met Stefanie in her life or ever saw her in person, yet she was obsessed with her and she hated her this much. The next day, May 23rd, 2007, David told Melissa that he could bring her a knife if she wanted one. She sent him a message back telling him she didn't need it. Quote, "I even brought it to school today, LOL." Melissa's mind was quite a scary place. She fantasized about wishing she could convince her brother to rape Stefanie. David and Melissa even had chats about abducting Stefanie and taking her to an isolated location so Melissa could take her life. When David told Melissa the plans would have to stay on hold until school was on summer break, so that way he would have access to a car that they could get away in, Melissa responded indignantly, "Fine, no sex until then." He replied, "Oh God, shush, forget it. I'll just go to jail, okay? 'Cause shit's gonna go wrong, and I have nowhere to run and ditch my stuff. I'm gonna have to get used to an 8x10 cell in adult jail." When summertime came, the couple still had vile discussions about the ways they could kill Stefanie. Melissa was letting all of this consume her, to the point she even dreamt about it. She told David in one of her dreams she was so envious of Stefanie that she took a knife and sliced off Stefanie's breasts. Next in the dream, Melissa claimed she slit Stefanie from head to toe and threw her off a balcony. The conversations began to manifest into an actual plan. It was no longer a so-called rant or something not to be taken very seriously. Melissa seemed to not want to commit the horrendous crime herself or get in any trouble for it. However, she did want someone else to do it, and she thought David should be the one to carry out the murder. She sent him a message saying, I don't care if someone kills her, but I don't want to, LOL. As summer turned to fall, Stefanie was entering into 9th grade at Rosedale Heights. Each morning, she would ride a bus to Woodbine Station. From there, she would take the subway to Castle Frank. During the school's lunch break, she would walk over to a supermarket to get a ham sandwich or a snack. Stefanie was making new friends and having a wonderful start to high school. Little did she know at the time, her life was in danger, and 2 people were scheming about how they could make her disappear as she's having fun and living her best life. In August of 2007, Melissa wrote to David, "I'm still waiting for her to die." David replied, "I will call you tomorrow, right after the dentist. I have info for the killing for you, to make you happy." One night in October of 2007, Melissa kept badgering David to just take a knife and go kill Stefanie. Aggravated by her constantly nagging him about it, he took off on foot to Stefanie's house. He stood in her driveway and called her from his cell phone, convincing her to come outside. When Stefanie walked out, very confused, David did not have the heart to go through with it. He told her, "Melissa wants me to stab you. When she calls, tell her I tried to so she'll stop pestering me to kill you." He dropped his cell phone beside her, turned around, and sauntered off into the night. Stefanie was stunned by all of this and did the only thing she could think of, which was to go tell her mother, Patricia, what happened. After she explained everything, Patricia called Melissa. She told her to stay away from Stefanie. Melissa was not fazed by Patricia's demand and told her, "She has got to stop spreading rumors about me." Patricia was a little shocked that Melissa was talking back to her like that, but she did attempt to talk to Melissa reasonably. She told Melissa that Stefanie was actually looking out for her because David was not being faithful. Patricia even explained that Stefanie had recently dated a boy who cheated on her, and she did not want Melissa or anyone else to feel how she felt or to be treated that way. The phone call did not seem to be helping, as Melissa was being brazen and disrespectful. Patricia threatened to get a restraining order against her and hung up the phone. Melissa immediately sent a message to her friend saying she, referring to Stefanie, said, "I told David to kill her, and I have no clue what she's talking about." Patricia, along with Stefanie's stepfather, James, went to David's and gave the cell phone to his mother, Cindy. They told her to make sure David stayed far away from their daughter. Cindy had no problem with that, and after hearing the whole story, she also thought it was best. Patricia was very uneasy and concerned when the incident happened, and she did want to go to the police, but she decided not to. She talked herself into believing it was only some drama between teenagers, and that would be the end of it. As usual, Melissa and David were on MSN Instant Messenger, chatting about taking Stefanie's life. David wrote, "What about Steph?" Melissa replied, "Bang bang." David responded, "I need a bang bang first. I want to bang you." Melissa wrote, "I want her dead, David, LOL. We've been through this. We've been through all of this. You have max until Halloween. Ooh, it should be on Halloween." Melissa told David that she was his hooker who would have sex with him standing up against a wall. Then they continued on to have talks about sexual escapades in a public park. Melissa was still hassling David about not going through with it, and on December 15th, 2007, she demanded that he get a gun by any means necessary. He was worried about Stefanie's parents seeing his face as well as leaving any fingerprints behind. He told Melissa he wanted to get a mask and gloves, and her response was, "Cut fucking leotards." She was completely fed up. In Melissa's mind, if she told David to jump, she wanted him to ask how high. She was livid. David had still not carried out the deed 2 days after that conversation. Melissa said if he did not do it, she was through with him and would date someone else. During an online chat, she told him, "You're getting blocked until you kill her." On New Year's Eve, back to where we were in the beginning of the episode, Stefanie was having a great time with her family, singing karaoke. Everybody was having such a fun time, and all was well in Stefanie's life. Reportedly that night, unbeknownst to Stefanie and everyone else in the home, David was prowling around outside of their house around 6:30. He snuck over to the neighbor's yard where he could talk on the phone without being heard. The neighbor saw David, but apparently didn't think anything of it. Melissa and David texted back and forth 65 times at the least that night. He did call Stefanie a few times, but she never came out of the house, and it's still unknown if she even answered or called him back at all. The next day, it was officially January 1st, 2008, and David could not get in touch with Melissa. He texted her all afternoon, "Where are you? You're cheating. Why won't you answer me?" Melissa ignored him for most of the day, but finally called him around 3 that afternoon, and they chatted for about 15 minutes. She made sure to tell him yet again that she was going to dump him for another guy. After 2 hours of texting back and forth, David decided to call Melissa. It was almost 6 o'clock, and he had reached his breaking point. He told Melissa that he had a knife, and he was on his way to Stefanie's house. Melissa called David twice more before he called Stefanie at 6:08 p.m. As mentioned before, Stefanie's parents, Patricia and James, were not at home. They had gone to visit James's mother. On their way home, Stefanie's little brother Ian called his mother, and he had heard something happened in the neighborhood, saying, quote, "Mommy, there's been a stabbing in our neighborhood. In our neighborhood." Patricia rang Stefanie's phone immediately after, but it went straight to voicemail. Patricia was irritated that Stefanie would not pick up the phone. She had told her daughter over and over again that if she wanted a cell phone, she had to answer it when her parents called. Minutes earlier, Stefanie was emerging from her house after David called. She thought the person on the other line was actually her ex-boyfriend, Steven. To her surprise, it was not. As she was coming out of the door, Melissa called David, but before she got a word out, he said, "I see her," and hung up. Melissa was stirring, wondering what was going on. She was sitting on pins and needles. She called Stefanie's phone after 15 minutes. No answer. Melissa was sickeningly pleased with that because, of course, no answer was a good sign to her. David had attacked Stefanie with an 8-inch kitchen knife. He had slashed through her new black sweater that her mother had given her as a Christmas present. He pierced her left breast. The knife went into her chest, which struck the inside of her back. David punctured Stefanie's right lung and slashed her liver open. Another stab went into her ribs and stomach. This made everything inside of her stomach empty out into the space in the abdomen that holds the intestines, stomach, and liver. He cut her left upper arm, and altogether, David had stabbed her 6 times. Stefanie was hobbling, trying to make it back to her house, but she couldn't do it, plummeting into the snow on the sidewalk. David ran to a friend's house after he stabbed Stefanie to ditch the knife. He explained to his friend what he had done, and his friend helped him hide his jacket, which was covered in blood. David and his friend took the jacket and buried it in his friend's backyard in the snow. Afterwards, David made a phone call to Melissa, telling her it was done. Melissa told him to hail a taxi and hurry over to her house to receive his reward. He sent her a text saying, "I love you, honey. I can't wait to see you." Right as he got to Melissa's, she asked him to show her how he did it, to reenact it. He did, and then they had sex. When they were finished, Melissa called her mother and requested that she bring her a latte. A 34-year-old man by the name of Gavin Shoebottom was driving by right after the stabbing happened and pumped the brakes of his car. Stefanie was laying in the freezing snow, still hanging on, but barely. Gavin rolled down his window, asking if she was okay, and she said no, that she needed help. Gavin held the teenage girl in his arms. She expressed to him that she was in a tremendous amount of pain, as he instructed her to try her best to hold her stomach as he frantically called 911. He was told by the operator to apply pressure to her wound. He ran to his car and grabbed a blanket to apply pressure to her stomach. Through all the pain she was experiencing, when Gavin asked her if she knew who did this, she was able to mumble as she pointed up the street, "Bags, Bags." Bags meaning David's last name, Bagshaw. Gavin was scared and impatient as they waited for help to get there. Stefanie's organs were shutting down, and she was slipping away. Gavin begged her to stay alert and told her everything would be okay. The ambulance finally arrived, scooping Stefanie up and away to the hospital. Sadly, they could not save her life, and she was pronounced deceased. Patricia and James were about to pull into their driveway when they were shocked to see there was police tape everywhere. They spotted a police officer at the end of their driveway and fearfully told him they needed to know what was happening because they couldn't find their daughter, Stefanie. Patricia also wanted to know if the culprit had been arrested. The policeman told her that they had not found a suspect and asked her to describe Stefanie. Patricia said she's 14 years old and she has dark hair, and the officer told her that the victim was older, likely in her 20s, and had been rushed to the Toronto East General Hospital. He never mentioned that the victim was not alive. Patricia was nauseous because her daughter could easily pass as being older than she was. The police officer took Patricia and James to the hospital. To their dismay, they saw the victim was in fact their daughter, and she was deceased. Utterly broken, they were ushered off into a room so they could have a private moment to spend with their daughter. That night, a Facebook message was delivered to Melissa from one of her friends. She said she heard that Stefanie had been murdered, asking Melissa if she was scared that she might be a suspect. Melissa wrote back, "Who knows, I wanted her dead, 'cause I only told you and David, so unless you told someone, only you should know. But I never did anything and neither did David. We fucked tonight, LOL." 2 detectives were on their way to the scene. When they arrived, they spoke with Patricia, James, Ian, and a few of David's friends. The detectives were learning the strange connections between Stefanie, David, and Melissa. At 2 a.m, Melissa heard a knock at the door. It was a detective. She was taken in for questioning, and her mother went along with them. Melissa was questioned about her boyfriend, David. At the time of the questioning, an officer in plain clothes went to David's mother's house, and he was arrested. Police obtained search warrants for Melissa's and David's homes and computers. The computers, along with Stefanie's, were given over to forensics. Melissa was completely nonchalant during her interrogation. She was cool, calm, and collected, which bewildered the detectives. She eventually confessed that she asked David to murder Stefanie. She also said, "I wanted Stefanie dead, and I'm glad she is." The interview was stopped and Melissa was arrested on the spot. A little later in the morning on January 2nd, police questioned Melissa a second time and charged her with first-degree murder with her mother sitting right beside her, in shock. Melissa waived her right to speak to an attorney and confessed that it was her plan, her idea more than David's. Melissa explained her infuriation towards Stefanie, how she was obsessed with Stefanie, and she believed Stefanie was spreading lies about her performing oral sex on other boys out of spite. Melissa only showed emotion, crying, that one time during the interrogation when talking about the rumors being spread about her. She told the detectives, "I said I want her dead, and I told him I might break up with him because things weren't so good anyways." Melissa's mother was in shock. It was written all over her face. She couldn't believe what she was hearing come out of her daughter's mouth. The officers were even in disbelief themselves. One detective said it was very chilling the way Melissa showed no signs of remorse at all, and that he had never seen a 15-year-old bear so little feelings about something so serious. She was officially convicted in March of 2008 of first-degree murder. Melissa sat stoic throughout her trial, which went on for 3 weeks. Her defense lawyer argued that Melissa was not serious when she continuously told David to kill Stefanie. He also argued that she was not responsible for David's actions and was not at the scene of the crime. The prosecutor told the court about David and Melissa's bizarre relationship, presented her interviews with the officers, as well as the email exchanges between her and David, the MSN chats, and 30,000 pages of cell phone records and instant messages, which were transcribed and available for the jury to read. As the prosecutor began explaining the crime, it was said there was an emotional disconnect from the reality of killing someone and facing the consequences of doing so during the planning of it. The jury consisted of 9 men and 3 women who deliberated over 3 days for about 20 hours. They found Melissa guilty of first-degree murder. She was examined by 2 psychiatrists before she was sentenced. A forensic psychiatrist and deputy clinical director at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health diagnosed Melissa with having a few symptoms of borderline personality disorder, anxiety, and that she struggled with body image issues. The psychiatrist depicted her in comparison to Glenn Close's role in the movie Fatal Attraction. Both psychiatrists agreed that Melissa showed antisocial tendencies in her intimate relationships, but otherwise functioned normally. Due to Melissa's age and how an individual's brain is not fully developed until their mid-20s, it was hard to diagnose her and to have a firm grasp when it came to what her motivation was. On the day of her sentencing, July 17, 2009, Melissa, then 17 years old, addressed the court with a statement she had written. She would not look at her own family or Stefanie's. Melissa only looked straight forward as she stated, "Every day I wish that I could go back in time and change everything I said and have Stefanie be alive with her family again. I want you to know I take full responsibility for my part. I know it's hard for you to believe me when I say that. I feel very bad for the lives I've ruined and affected. I know you may never forgive me for what I caused, and I understand that, but I wanted to share my apology with you." Also, she stated that no one should have to lose someone they love in such a violent and horrific way, adding that she felt bad for the lives she's ruined, but believed she could still contribute to society in a positive way. Justice Ian Nordheimer was not moved, to say the least. He said that her statement was, quote, "an unequivocal acceptance of responsibility for the crucial role that she played in the death of Stefanie Rengel." He dismissed what is called the 11th hour apology, letting the court know that 2 psychiatrists agreed that she views herself as a victim, had the capacity for manipulation, and does not have empathy. During his decision, he said, quote, "One can only hope that they remain so, given how truly malevolent they are in their content. The concept that teenage angst becomes a driving force for murder leaves one both shocked by and incredulous at its manifestation." Justice Nordheimer also remarked that Melissa still harbored thoughts of causing other people pain who she thought had said hurtful things about her. The prosecution requested that she be sentenced as an adult, and Justice Nordheimer agreed. He also said Melissa's mental issues had not been rightly diagnosed at that time, and due to that, she was under no treatment. He ruled that she was a potential danger to society and for the rest of her life would need to be monitored closely. Melissa was sentenced as an adult to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years, but reminded her that no matter what happened, her criminal record would follow her like a dark shadow for the rest of her life. Both families reportedly cried during Melissa's sentencing, and Stefanie's brother, 13-year-old Ian, had a smirk on his face when Melissa's sentence was announced. Justice Nordheimer stated, quote, "The puppet master is not less blameworthy than the puppet. Indeed, I would suggest that the master is more culpable since he or she puts the wheels in motion and then stands back under a facade of disassociation while the scheme that they have created unfolds. A person who plans and orchestrates and directs another person to take the life of a human being is at least as morally culpable as the person who does the actual act. While Melissa may only pose a risk in a narrow set of circumstances, that does not mean that the risk is any less real or the consequences of its emergence any less grave." Melissa was taken away in handcuffs as her mother and other family members cried. When everyone left the courtroom, people from media outlets were outside waiting. Ian spoke with his mother Patricia by his side. He said, quote, "We are relieved at the adult sentence, and we appreciate the difficult decision that Judge Nordheimer faced." Ian also remarked that Melissa was a disturbed individual who needed all of the help the system could possibly offer her. The prosecutor also spoke to the media, saying, quote, "It was a very adult crime, and for the protection of the public, it required an adult sentence. Death is permanent, and there's no second chances. It's not a video game where you hit a restart button." David pleaded guilty in April of 2009 to murdering Stefanie after Melissa was convicted. His hearing began in September of 2009. He expressed many feelings and emotions unlike the puppet master, Melissa. David actually cried a lot during his trial, holding his head in his hands all throughout. The prosecutor argued, when you have someone prepared to slaughter a child on the street to serve some other purpose, that's a huge warning bell. Unlike Melissa, when he stood up to give his statement, he looked right at Stefanie's family, apologizing, and saying he would never forgive himself for the, quote, "disgusting crime of killing an innocent girl who deserved to live." His attorney told the court that David was more worried about the pain and suffering he caused everyone more than he cared about what was going to happen to himself. Justice Nordheimer believed David was truly remorseful and had empathy that was genuine. He also said that David's role was the more reluctant of the two in the evil endeavor. However, Justice Nordheimer stated those aspects could not blind them all to the fact that David still posed a threat. The psychiatrist who examined David stated that he did have a history of aggression, mostly regarding fights at school, and had issues with not thinking before he acted. It was said that he was doing better on medication, that he was doing well with his schoolwork, and he was in favor for his overall treatment. The psychiatrist said David would likely be able to be rehabilitated within 8 to 10 years. David was also sentenced as an adult to life imprisonment. but he would be able to appeal for parole in 10 years. Justice Nordheimer stated, quote, "Melissa may have given the orders, but it was David who carried them out." He also told the court that David could have left the relationship and told police at any time what Melissa was planning, but he did not. The judge stated, quote, "Notwithstanding the number of times that these events have been replayed, both in this court and elsewhere, they lose none of their truly evil nature when they are once again recounted. Unlike his former girlfriend, David seems capable of empathy and remorse. Indeed, in his statement at this hearing, David expressed in some detail his shame and his regret for what he had done, and I believe he was entirely sincere when he did so." 2 psychiatrists had testified that David was not the type of person who would reoffend. In court, Patricia said of Melissa, quote, "I want inner peace, which is believed to come from forgiveness, but I'm unable to forgive someone who has shown no remorse." When referring to David, she talked about the times when Stefanie and David had such a great friendship, at least her daughter thought, and Stefanie was so warm and kind towards David. Quote, "She immediately forgave his temper and violent outbursts and wished us to do the same." The violation of Stefanie's trust and care made her mother hurt even more. Outside of the court, her brother Ian spoke again to the press and said, quote, "Being 4 days shy of 18 should not mean automatically knocking 15 years off the sentence for first-degree murder. My sister Stefanie didn't even get to live 15 years. Stefanie, David, and Melissa's parents all grieved for their children, of course in different ways. At the time, Patricia was so depressed that she could not go back to work, and she was thinking about being a counselor for victims of crime. She was battling extreme anxiety, she wasn't able to get any sleep, she would not go outside by herself at night, and watching television was even difficult for her. Patricia's mind was constantly reeling, thinking about violent acts being done to her children. Patricia said as she fiddled with her silver locket necklace, which had some of Stefanie's ashes inside, quote, "The hardest time to lose a kid is at age 14. You're holding the reins back, and they're always pushing, and you have to say no a lot. You go from being the adored parent to them wanting to hang out more with their friends." A few days before Stefanie's death, her biological father, Adolfo, had received a Christmas card from Stefanie. After the loss of his daughter, he placed the Christmas card in a picture frame. Quote, "I never thought I would lose a child like this. She was smart. She named the killer. She was smart till the day she died." In 2011, 21-year-old David Bagshaw faced yet another charge for attempting to murder a fellow inmate on March 20th. There were several prisoners who attacked their 34-year-old fellow inmate in the gym with weapons. David and the group were told to stop by prison guards, but they wouldn't, and even ignored warning shots. The prison guards ended up shooting 29-year-old inmate Jordan Trudeau and David. Jordan passed away after being shot once in the chest, while David was taken to be treated at a hospital. After this incident, psychiatrists who had previously said that David was likely to be rehabilitated after 8 to 10 years remarked that he will clearly be a challenge in the years ahead. David was a candidate to possibly be taken to a special handling unit, which is a very secure facility for prisoners who might kill or injure other inmates. Melissa had been serving her time in a youth center in Brampton, Ontario, and reported on December 23, 2011, she and her lawyers were in court attempting to get her stay there extended. The prosecutor argued that Melissa was the same person now as she was then, and she was not being treated because she refused to be, adding that for Melissa, embracing the superficial trappings of what social workers call pro-social behavior was a piece of cake for her. As the judge ruled, it was obvious where his ruling was going, since in January Melissa would be 20 years old and the protocol is to transfer inmates automatically to an adult prison. Melissa was irate, and her face flushed as she turned her face away from the public gallery. No one denied the fact that Melissa had done exceptionally well at the youth center. She graduated from her high school with all A's, participated in groups, and created programs herself. However, being academically bright and behaving well wasn't the issue at hand. All of that did not mean anything. The prosecutor said, quote, "Melissa Todorovic's issues are lethal. The evidence is clear on that and hard to pin down." Melissa turned down therapy time and time again in the youth center to address one issue the judge had pointed out, which was that she had a frightening flaw in her character. She had outgrown the youth facility and would be better served at an adult one. As Melissa was escorted out of the courtroom, her family and Stefanie's family watched on. At the time, Stefanie's brother was 16, and as he sat in the courtroom, it was reported that he had the same look of loss on his face as he did 3 years before. In 2017, Melissa was granted 3 days of absence to stay in a halfway house since she had accepted medication, counseling, worked on managing her jealousy, anger, and manipulation. However, the 25-year-old still had to work on her self-esteem and other issues. While there was a lot of work for Melissa to do, they thought they were moving in the right direction. At the hearing, Melissa gave more insight into her thinking process back in 2008, before she was approved for her 3-day absence. Quote, "It was a game that we would play continuously. I liked to see how much he would do for me. My thinking at the time was that if the girls were out of the picture, I could be happy with my boyfriend. When I saw it on the news, I felt guilt then, but I didn't really understand the impact. Now I feel like I'm a monster for telling someone to kill somebody." Her parole officer noted that Melissa initially displayed a lack of insight and empathy, but had made significant gains after her appeal was denied. Unexpectedly, Melissa received a letter from David, but she claimed she did not want anything to do with him. It was reported by the Canadian press that during her unescorted absences, Melissa would continue her therapy sessions, which she said she could no longer access in prison because she was not considered to have a severe mental illness. She also had planned to work with an employment counselor to see what options she could have once she was possibly released. Her parole officer said the absences would also help to ease her anxiety when it came to reintegrating into society, noting Melissa had, quote, "grown up in prison." Stefanie's mother, Patricia, felt that everything Melissa said sounded scripted, and she had still not apologized for what she did. Quote, "Once she murdered my daughter, something inside me broke. Sometimes I think of it as a broken filter. I can no longer filter out intrusive, fearful feelings. No amount of psychologist visits, exercise, or prescriptions can stop this from happening. I do not see a changed person in Melissa. I see someone who has become more cunning, hoping with those few words of so-called remorse that she is fooling those who should have the experience to see through them. I do not hear empathy here, except for herself. It's disconcerting when she said today that she could not show any empathy for us at trial because she was not responsible, and yet lots of people felt empathy for us who weren't even related to the case. That's a red flag to me. The only time she showed any emotion was when they asked if she was still concerned about her body weight. That's the only time she got upset. So it's still all about her. Stefanie's father, Adolfo, said, quote, "I believe she's very smart and she knew she had to say what she did to get out." Melissa was granted a full day of parole for 6 months starting in November of 2018. After that 6 months, she was to be reviewed to see if she was making any positive progress. That meant she was able to move right away into a halfway house. In 2017, Melissa had enjoyed 3 72-hour unescorted absences and had, for several months, been permitted to work outside of the facility, going back to the halfway house at night. In 2019, Melissa was arrested for violating her parole. She was supposed to report any romantic relationships, but she did not, and was reportedly in a love triangle with 2 other inmates and manipulating them against each other. Patricia told the Star in an email, quote, "We were told she's back in Grand Valley awaiting a 30-day review from a parole officer to decide whether her day parole will be denied or resumed. There was a warrant for her arrest about 2 weeks ago. The warrant was executed and she was taken to Veneer until, I believe, last Friday, then transferred back to Grand Valley." Before Melissa had violated her parole, she was told she could spend Christmas of 2018 with her family. Her family lives close to where Stefanie's parents lived, and Stefanie's parents were livid. Adolfo Rengel stated, quote, "It never ends with her. I said, no way. If this happens, I will go to the media. My kids are so afraid Melissa Todorovic will come and hurt them." Then corrections decided to keep her in house arrest for those days. In 2019, there were major concerns about Melissa showing the same behavior that landed her in prison to begin with, and she was to remain behind bars. I wanted to end this episode talking about Stefanie's family and how they were doing after the initial verdicts. Patricia and her husband James left Stefanie's room as it was. Her room was filled with body sprays, birthday cards, pictures of herself with her friends, stuffed teddy bears, and award ribbons from sporting events. Taped to Stefanie's wall is a board where all of her friends would write different little messages and sayings on it. Her parents have kept her door shut and even put a sign on the door asking the nanny to not go in to clean it. They wanted it to stay just as she had left it. Of course, Patricia can't help but to go inside of her daughter's room, reminisce, and look at all of the small things that she never thought would mean so much. Such as the strands of hair in Stefanie's hairbrush. Everything of Stefanie's is a precious reminder of her and the beautiful person that she was inside and out. Her mother said, quote, "It's the last thing I can hold on to. I don't go in very often because I want to savor it." After both teenagers had been sentenced in 2009, the prosecutor walked out and told news outlets, quote, "The more you learn about Stefanie Rengel, and I have learned a lot, the more you realize what a loss it was." As of 2021, David Bagshaw and Melissa Todorovic's appeals for a chance at parole have been denied. Thank you so much for listening to this episode about Stefanie Rengel. I want to give a quick shout out to the Patreon members on patreon.com/ReverieTrueCrime. Thank you so much to Steve, Stephanie, Rob, Dooley, Angel, TZ, Badcast Company, Darling Jade, Matt, Chelsea, and Lorraine. Your support means the world. Until next time, everyone stay safe and take care.